There comes a time in your life when you realize you're not meant to chase what's not choosing you. You stop running after things that don't belong to you, relationships, titles, attention, approval, and you start walking in the confidence of who you already are. That's okay with me. That's a sign you're growing. That's a sign you're becoming a high value person, because high value doesn't mean loud. It doesn't mean flashy. It doesn't mean you're always seen, always praised. High value means you know what you carry and you're not afraid to sit still and let what's meant for you find you in peace. There's a certain power in no longer chasing, because chasing comes from a place of lack. It comes from the belief that what you want is out there and you have to fight tooth and nail to prove yourself worthy enough to catch it. But the truth is, what's for you doesn't need to be forced. What's aligned with your calling will meet you in purpose, not desperation. That's the difference between hustling for validation and standing in divine confidence. One leaves you exhausted, the other leaves you whole. You start to understand your value when you realize that your presence is enough. You don't need to overperform. You don't need to twist yourself into versions of other people just to be accepted. When you become a high value person, you stop apologizing for who you are. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You show up fully, authentically. And if that makes people uncomfortable, that's their conviction, not your problem. And this kind of shift, it doesn't always feel loud. It's not about walking into a room and demanding attention. It's about walking into a room and not needing it. It's about being okay if no one claps, no one compliments, no one notices, because you still move with intention. You still give your best. You still walk with purpose, because your identity is no longer tied to response. It's routed in who God created you to be, and that doesn't change based on who sees it. You also start to become more discerning. You don't entertain every conversation. You don't respond to every insult. You don't pursue relationships that cost your peace, not because you're prideful, but because you understand the weight of your time and the value of your spirit. You've learned that just because something is available doesn't mean it's worthy of access. And you're not bitter, you're better. You're wiser. You've been through too much to go back to the version of you that chased out a fear of being alone. Now you attract. You attract peace. You attract purpose. You attract people who recognize your worth without needing you to perform. You attract alignment, not chaos. And the most beautiful part, you're okay with me? You're no longer controlled by what stays or leaves. You know that loss doesn't define you, delay doesn't destroy you, and waiting doesn't weaken you. Because when your confidence is rooted in something deeper than applause, you stop reaching for what doesn't fit and start receiving what was always yours. This isn't arrogance. It's awareness. It's clarity. It's knowing that your value isn't up for debate or discount. You're not in a season of chasing anymore. You're in a season of becoming still, becoming grounded, becoming whole. And in that stillness, everything you were running after starts to recognize the light in you. Because what's real doesn't have to be chased. It just has to be received. There's something powerful about mastering your emotions, not suppressing them and not pretending they don't exist, but truly understanding them so they no longer control you. See, a high value person knows how to feel without falling apart. They know how to pause before reacting. They know how to protect their peace, even when everything around them is pulling for a reaction. And that kind of strength, it's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's quiety, it's steady, it's grown. When you start becoming high value, you noticing that not every battle deserves your energy. Not every opinion deserves a response. You don't have to clap back, prove your point, or defend your name in every room that mentions it. Why? Because your peace is more valuable than your pride. Your maturity is more important than your ego. And your growth is bigger than the need to be right. You've been through too much, grown through too much. He healed through too much to be pulled back into places you've outgrown just to prove something to people who never saw your worth in the first place. It's not that you don't feel anymore. You still feel deeply. You still get disappointed. You still get hurt. But your emotions don't drive the car anymore. They're not in control. You've learned to sit what you feel without letting it lead you into decisions you'll regret. That's real maturity. That's a high value mindset, knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to walk away and when to stand your ground, when to cry, and when to move forward through the tears anyway. And let me tell you, that kind of emotional strength doesn't come easy. It's not built in comfort. It's built in the moments you wanted to break down, but chose to breathe instead. It's built in the moments you wanted to snap back, but you said, God, help me hold my tongue. It's built in the moments you wanted revenge, but chose healing. Not because it felt good, okay me, but because you knew who you were becoming mattered more than what you were going through. See, emotional control isn't about being numb. It's about being wise. It's about being so rooted in who you are and whose you are that storms don't shake you the way they used to. People can't disappoint you, but they can't destroy your joy. Circumstances can change, but they can't take your peace. You've trained yourself to respond with discernment, not just emotion. And that's what makes you high value. That's what makes you different. You don't let chaos pull you out of character anymore. People might not understand it. They might say you've changed. They might say you're too quiet now, too calm, too different. And you know what? That's a good thing, because peace doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like choosing silence when you could shout. Sometimes it looks like walking away with your dignity instead of staying and arguing for your relevance. Sometimes it looks like letting God handle it because you're too wise to keep throwing pearls to swine. The truth is, the more you grow, the less you react, not because to be okay with, not because you don't care, because you care too much about your own soul to keep letting other people's chaos dictate your rhythm. You've tasted peace, and now you protect at all costs. You don't respond from wounds anymore. You respond from wisdom, from wholeness, from clarity, because when you master your emotions, you don't just survive life, you start leading it. One of the clearest signs that you're becoming a high value person is when you stop begging for validation and start finding your worth within. And that shift, it's not just about confidence, it's about healing. It's about finally realizing that you don't need the approval of people who never saw your soul, never knew your struggle, never cared enough to stay when things got real. You begin to understand that the most dangerous thing you can do is hand your identity to someone else and let them decide how valuable you are. There was a time when you probably chased it, chased attention, chased affirmation, chased likes, comments, people clapping for you so you could feel like you mattered. But every time they stopped clapping, your identity shook. Every time they withdrew, you felt empty. That's because you were looking for something external to fill what only God could confirm within. But as you grow, as you heal, you stop begging people to see you. You start walking like you already know you're seen. You start standing like you already know you're chosen. You start showing up like you've got nothing to prove, because you don't. Validation is addictive when you don't know your worth. But when you finally stop chasing it, you gain something stronger than applause: peace. Peace in knowing that your value isn't based on what room you're invited into, who follows you, or who's cheering you on. Peace in knowing that your worth is steady, unchanged by rejection, untouched by silence. You're no longer chasing people who don't call back. You're no longer lowering your standards just to be kept. You've outgrown the need to be accepted by those who couldn't handle the weight of your authenticity. And you stop performing. You stop dressing up your truth to make it palatable. You stop softening your voice to be more likable. You stop trying to impress people who wouldn't love you even if you gave them every version of yourself. You begin to understand that real freedom doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from no longer needing to be. That's the pivot. That's the transformation. That's what makes you high value. You've learned that your worth doesn't waver depending on the opinions of others. It's rooted in something unshakable. You don't force connections anymore. You don't force conversations. You don't force yourself into circles that make you feel like you have to shrink just to fit in. Instead, you wait. You wait for spaces that recognize your light without dimming it. You wait for people who meet your energy without draining it. You wait because you finally believe that you're worth waiting for too. And that kind of internal strength, it scares people who are still looking for themselves in others, but it sets you free. It liberates you from the constant pressure to perform, to please, to prove. You no longer need everyone to understand you because you finally understand yourself. And in that understanding, you find power. In that stillness, you find strength. So when you stop begging for validation, you don't become cold. You become whole. You're no longer desperate for attention because you finally learned how to give yourself love. You're no longer seeking permission to exist because you've already embraced the truth that your existence is purpose enough. You don't need the applause. You don't need the likes. You don't need the praise, because when you know your worth, you walk different. And that difference, that's what makes you undeniable. A real sign you're stepping into becoming a high value person is when you stop trying to fix others and start focusing on fixing yourself. That shift right there, that's where everything starts to change. Because the truth is, for a long time, some of us waste years thinking we're called to be saviors for people who never even asked to be saved. We get caught up in trying to rescue, trying to pull people out of their own chaos, trying to carry weight that was never ours to carry in the first place. And it drains us. It wears us out. It distracts us from the healing we need for our own hearts. See, there's something that happens when you stop pointing fingers at what's broken in everyone else and finally turn inward, not in a selfish way, but in a responsible way, in a way that says, I want to grow. I can't keep trying to change everybody else. I've got to confront me. That takes courage. It takes maturity. It takes a kind of self-honesty that's not always pretty, but is absolutely necessary, because growth doesn't happen in blaming. It happens in ownership. When you really start to evolve, you realize that fixing yourself isn't just about becoming a better version for other people. It's about being accountable to your own soul. It's about facing those patterns, those insecurities, those wounds you kept avoiding by keeping busy helping everybody else. Sometimes helping is just a distraction. Sometimes it's easier to fix them than to sit still and deal with the storm inside of you. But at some point, you get tired of running. You get tired of projecting. You get tired of looking outward for answers that have always been locked inside your own spirit. Fixing yourself is not about being perfect. It's about being honest. It's about sitting with the pain long enough to understand it. It's about forgiving yourself for the ways you've fallen short, for the ways you've accepted less, for the times you didn't show up as your best self, not so you can live in shame, but so you can live in truth. And truth is the only soil strong enough to grow anything lasting. When you stop trying to fix other people, you also stop expecting them to complete you. You stop needing them to change so you can be okay. You stop holding them responsible for your joy, your peace, your value. You learn to stand on your own. You learn to be whole by yourself. You learn to be filled from the inside out instead of the outside in. And that shift, that's what makes you powerful. That's what makes you high value. Because now your stability isn't dependent on someone else's behavior. Your emotional state isn't determined by someone else's decisions. You've taken full responsibility for your own healing. And when you do that, something beautiful happens. You start attracting differently, because healed people attract peace. Whole people attract alignment, and strong people, quietly strong people, don't chase. They don't beg. They don't force. They just move in truth. And truth draws what's meant for it. So no, you're not here to fix everyone else. That's not your assignment. Your assignment is you. And when you commit to that, when you truly decide that your healing, your growth, your purpose is worth your full attention, you step into a version of yourself that's unshakable. Fixing yourself is the most revolutionary thing you can do.